How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the Legions Lounge. I'm your host, Matt, here with CEO of Future Lore Studios and creator of Legion's Realms at War, Taylor. How's it going today?
Good man. It's been a hustle and bustle kind of day. We just
Definitely has.
we're recording this on a Sunday. We don't normally record these on Sundays,
Mhm.
but we just finished up a Battle for Glory at Nerds, the first of the year. So hustled back from there to make sure we make this podcast in time. And we have a special guest with us tonight, don't we, Matt?
We got Samuel Graham from Samuel Graham Does TCGs. How's it going today?
Doing great. Hello, friends.
How's it going?
I always love your upbeat personality
Mhm.
and mentality, Sam. It's always an uplifting thing, and especially this is going to be airing on a Monday morning. So, what better than to wake up to your beautiful voice?
It's like a super positive way. It's just such a good way to start the day. I'm
I do what
jealous.
I can. And honestly, I was telling Matt a minute ago, his voice is spectacular for this thing too. So he does a wonderful job of also starting off the week on a good note. So just the general way that this whole podcast is presented does a really good job of picking things up on a positive note.
Well, thank
That's
you so
great,
much,
because,
man.
I have the Matt's great at it. It's his first foray and jump into this. I think I think he has a future in being a radio host or a talk show host or even online podcast like this. I mean, me, I have the face for radio, so I mean, I can get by, but
I mean, your enthusiasm, praising Matt is not to shortchange you either, Taylor. You do a pretty fantastic job of your passion, your excitement for everything coming through as well. So it's not just Matt. Don't take it the wrong way.
No, I don't take it the wrong way at all, man. I'm a humble dude, and I produce a game, and I'd rather not get the recognition for it and just plug away. And as long as the community supports my dream and my passion, then I'll keep it trucking along, right? So.
Mm-hmm. Dude, I really appreciate it, but I really don't think I'm all that special, man. It's just a pretty chill. I just talk, man. I just talk.
And
you do a good job of it.
Exactly. And some people just like to listen. So, that here's for all the listeners out there. And speaking for all the listeners out there, look at my little segue. Where can they find us, Matt? If you're out listening to this podcast right now, where can they find future podcasts and the ones in the past?
You can find this and future podcasts on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and Stitcher. Basically, anywhere you can have like an audio streaming service, you can find this right there. It's super handy. It's awesome.
See that, Samuel? You're doing transmedia platforms now, man. You're jumping from YouTube to online air now.
That was a mouthful. That is a whole lot of places. Love it.
It is awesome, yeah. It's quite fun.
Well, we're not all that big yet, but if we manage there, it's going to be because Samuel brought us there. So.
Yep.
Now hold on a sec. I think we might have this the wrong way.
No, not at all.
So what's on for this morning, man? What are we talking about today?
Well, Sam here is a big Angel fan. So,
yes,
here to talk about Angels.
All right.
So what?
And I certainly have questions because
Okay.
I've done my best to put together Angel stuff to throw out there, and I just haven't quite figured it out yet.
Angels
but I haven't given up.
Very difficult.
Yeah. So
they are one of those high ceiling decks for sure.
Absolutely. And
100%.
For me, and I was I've talked about this multiple times. A lot of times the first thing that strikes me in a game that's not like an existing massive IP like a Star Wars or something like that is going to be the art that just kind of sucks me in. And that was true with Legions. So I saw the art starting to pop up. I want to say the first time I saw it was when Louis was doing his first look. So, the art popping up was the first thing I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then specifically, I've always been a sucker for Angel art. especially in sort of like the fantasized angel stylistic kind of stuff, like is very prevalent in the angel cards for this. So that immediately sucked me in. I'm like, well, that's the first thing I'm giving a shot. Now, it just so happened that I picked a particularly difficult nut to crack.
Yeah, they're
Yeah. So
they're
when
kind of.
we
Sorry, you go ahead.
I was gonna say when we first designed up angels, I'm not gonna lie to you, when they first made them, they didn't work, they didn't function, and not just like they were broken or anything. Like, I mean, like they actually didn't function. The deck did nothing. Like my main play tester, Malik, who's been along with me this entire ride, and he's been the head of my testing and development. And I remember the very first day we sat down and played that 8-9 years ago, and it was just like, he's like, Taylor, this doesn't actually do anything. What is this garbage, right? And so we literally had to go back to the drawing board several times with the deck and modify it and make it what it is today. And not saying what it is today functions any better than it did then, but what it does is it functions in a much different way now. And one thing we do take pride in the fact is that when we created angels, holy counters were always part of it. Back then they were called protection counters when we first started, and we changed them to holy counters. We felt that there was more suiting for the divine nature of being angels. Ironically, I believe we clearly struck gold or something with it, because I believe it was last year that Magic introduces a version of protection counters, like a version of our angel counters, into their game. So clearly we were on to something, just years ahead of somebody else for once. So it's great to see that. But overall, yeah, we when we first made them, we understood that not only thematically both angels and demons should be paired together, but they
obviously,
100%.
But like thematically in terms of story wise and lore, but also they were the two most complex decks to play out of the box. So we felt the two heavy control decks would be paired up against each other in a starter product. So if you're going to learn something challenging, you're going to learn them together. And we always, even at cons, we're going to Gen Con in August, right? And even some of the Comic Cons and stuff that we've already done, when we describe and learning process to new players, we kind of do it in a range of difficulty upwards, right? So we start them usually with heroes and orcs because they're the easiest to learn. It's really easy to say red deck wins, go fast, go hard, push, attack, right? Absolutely. Be the last one standing, basically, right? So angels and demons have a little bit of more of a ceiling and a learning curve to them. And, we had a player tonight who is relatively new to the game. He picked it up within the past, 4 or 5 months. And he decided to take his crack at angels tonight, and he finished 7th with it. So, and he's relatively new to the deck, and he's been piloting it very well. So even some of our seasoned players are like, you're piloting this one of the best we've seen. So
impressive.
Yeah.
Was it a more... Sorry.
Go for it, Sam.
Well, I was just going to say, was it a more traditional angel build? I remember there was that for one of the 5Ks, I believe it was, that had sort of a different than traditional angel build that did pretty well. Was this one more normal, I guess? Yeah, more angel.
Yeah. The one that you're referring to before, the 5K, we commonly refer to in our Discord and our community as Pangels. Because they brought the pain. They were a deck that was, if you guys or anyone watching or listening is familiar with the Magic concept of blue and you counter everything that your opponent does, is very much what the Pangel deck was. And it was actually Malik that piloted it to show people that the deck could be played in a certain way that no one had thought of before. So but tonight, for instance, and all day today, Jake, who's our player from Toronto, our capital city, he took the train down. He's super dedicated. He is a 2.5-hour train ride. He comes in, shows up, sets out angels, submits the deck list to me, and I was like, all right, let's see it happen, right? And he did really well. And to answer your question, Sam, he did a bang up job, really good job with a traditional angel build.
Nice.
Traditional angels are fun, but they're very difficult. Like they're very difficult. Like you kind of pilot yourself to death most of the time. Was he was he using Angelica?
Um,
Or sorry,
yeah, he was using Alexandria as the
Alexandria.
guardian for sure. Yeah. One of the things we found that I think he said it best was the fact that it's one of those decks where it's very unforgiving in
Oh yeah.
terms of um, it's one of those where your opponent doesn't beat you, you beat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of those like if you make one or two mistakes and it costs you the game, right? So it's one of those where don't get us wrong, it's a very very strong deck, but you have to pilot it almost perfectly.
So
Yeah.
that sort of answers the question that I was gonna ask as a semi follow up. Just sort of, has anybody actually, is there really a difference in power level, or have people just not completely cracked the way to get the power out of it yet? But I think you answered that with that answer.
Yeah. Yeah, like I think right now we keep a running tally of tournament wins, and Angels have two. One of them was the Angel version, so the Malik showed our community and everything that there was an alternate way to play it where it was a 50% bounty engine. But there is another Angel win that is pure Angel, right? And
Yeah.
it's been one of those tough nuts to crack. I know Matt himself has taken a crack at Angels in tournament play. Josh has done the same thing. Some of our resident continual players. I know you met Josh at the 5K in
absolutely.
Tennessee, right? He came back and played the 5K up here with Angels and didn't do so well because he hasn't really quite mastered it like Mythical Beast. And very similar. Mythical Beasts are very much the same way. They're a deck there. A lot of players haven't been able to figure it out, but Josh has been able to master it, and he's piloted it to tournament wins. So we wanted to give variety to everything, right?
Absolutely.
You see the decks that win right now, like tonight. I'm not saying Orcs ended up winning tonight with Pat piloting. It was his first major tournament win, and I'm not saying that it's a turnkey kind of deck, but it definitely is much easier to pilot and has a lot more forgiveness to it compared to some of these really really skill intensive decks, right? So, and that's the kind of variety we wanted to add to the game.
No, exactly.
Awesome.
And I think they're very skill intensive, but I think it's the wins as like when you're playing Angels feel so rewarding though. Like they just feel so rewarding. I don't want to say compared to or anything like that, but in my experience at least, playing a pure Angel deck against um like a very turnkey deck, you winning as Angels just feels so much better.
Yeah, it's got like this validation to it. It's just like, you know what, I mastered it, I climbed the mountain,
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Oh, go for it.
I was just gonna say there was the TV show Heroes like 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I was just picturing the Hero Nakamura character. Yatta! I did it. Like, what's the?
Well, and I think that's the thing. It really showcases. We didn't want to make so much variety and so much expansion to the fact that like honestly, don't get me wrong. I know you're a big fan of Flesh and Blood, Sam. I am a huge supporter of Flesh and Blood. I don't play it myself. I follow it along very well.
Sure.
I understand the game, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for James White and LSS because, I mean, without them, honestly, I don't think we would have had the platform to launch because they smashed open the door for being games not being the big three. So
Sure.
I think they blazed a really good, healthy trail, and we were able to blaze a trail off of that. So I have a tremendous amount of respect for them, their studio, and for James for creating a fantastic game. And but one thing I do have to say as I'm witnessing Flesh and Blood from an outsider looking in is that with the expansions, with different sets coming out, adding the variety of heroes, excellent, because you got to keep the game going, you got to keep it spice, you got to build it for draft and sealed. But one thing I have noticed is that the pool expands exponentially set after set after set, and it gets to a point where I'm sure you've probably seen it. I see all your box openings, right?
Right.
That for instance, Azalea hasn't won a major tournament, right? And
Absolutely.
And there's a reason for that, because there really hasn't been any ranger support, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing is that when you expand so wide so quickly, it's hard to cover all your bases,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I'm not saying it makes it difficult to make sure everything is balanced. It does in its own way, but one of the things we wanted to keep focused is that there's 8 legions in Legion's Realms of War, right? With 9th is with
Absolutely.
the bounty realm, but we hone it in. There's not going to be more legions. So
Sure.
instead of adding a wide range, we added depth instead.
I think I really like that. It makes a lot more, like, I don't want to say, I'm not trying to compare it to another game and saying which is better. I just really like it because then it allows for a deeper lore, because then you can have lore within each of the realms and how the lore between
Mm-hmm.
the realms interact. It causes a very nice blend of things.
Well, and that's cool too, is having the approach to it of, to your point, having each of the individual, legions in their realms, but instead of having a whole new color group, you've got a different warlord for an existing one. So you've still got the same group, but a different faction of it that might play differently. So you can still have the same base. I really love that. And to Matt's point, getting the lore behind that, it's really cool to hear, okay, this isn't just okay, we slapped another card here. Actually hearing, okay, this is the motivation of the new warlord. Here's the story behind their relationship with the existing warlord, why all of this is happening. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff. That's really been cool to hear getting dove into.
Yeah,
No,
and I
it's
know
so
I
sick.
got a chance to talk to you about that in person, Sam. And I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. Later on in the tournament, when you have the guys playing top 4, and those games were going on for quite some time, and
Yeah.
we got a chance to jump in, and you got a chance to ask me some pretty in-depth questions, and not just like on the story side of things, but the printing side of things, the company side of
Yeah.
things, and hopefully I was able to answer your questions. And give you a little more insight into what it takes behind the scenes, what it takes to put a
Yeah.
card game out there into the world. And
I did have this is actually one of the questions I asked you that day, but I thought your answer was really interesting, and thought other people might kind of appreciate that same answer, because I just thought it was cool. It was my question about like the cards per pack, the pack layout, what went into making those choices. I really thought your answer to that was interesting.
yeah, so you're referring to the golden pack ratio.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so much like I have been my whole life, I don't come from a lot. So I everything that I've done, I've worked hard for, and I've learned. And it's just if you continue to learn throughout your life, you learn some really key things, and not just in the business or the field that you're in, but just in life in general. And I've been a real big student of the trading card game world, student of how to go about building algorithms. Like, there's a tremendous amount of math involved. There's a
Mm-hmm.
tremendous amount of different moving parts that people don't really see on the face value, right, of the cards, right? They see the cards, they look beautiful, they look at the art, they read the card effects, they judge the card. They literally judge it like a book, like a book's cover,
Mm-hmm.
right? And they don't know the time and the effort and the energy that puts behind it. And I don't think it can really portray how much time and effort goes behind it. I mean, I've been releasing a little bit of behind the scenes kind of stuff, videos and stuff like that I
Yeah.
know our community's been watching. But to go to your what you said about the golden pack ratio, like, I've been a consistent student of the development of TCGs, and obviously I watch and listen to podcasts and seminars, and like the psychology of the sell, and how to get people to buy your product off a store shelf, and what is eye catching for people. And there's psychology behind it, there's math behind it. But when you get really into the meat and potatoes, and you really funnel into the concept of the trading card game space, some key things stand out. Number one, Mark Rosewater's 20 years, 20 lessons. For anybody out there that's listening to this that is wanting to design or create a trading card game, one that's already working on one and is having a little bit of a challenge or whatever, Mark Rosewater's 20 Years, 20 Lessons, he goes down and breaks down everything from all the first 20 years of Magic that he was a part of, what he learned each year, how that you can't change the consumer, so you have to change your game to match the consumer. And you can't make people rethink something that they don't already know. So the big thing with me was comparing with that, but also this concept of, and it keeps ringing in my head, is the concept of the 7 deadly sins of trading card games. Learning from the card graveyard of TCGs that has come before, and why did they fail? What were some of the key factors? What were the underlying common denominators of every one of those games? And you can look at it from game design, you can look at it from card layout, you can look at it from artwork, you can look at it from mismanaging funds, but ultimately there's some key things that are missing there. And what I don't think it gets talked about enough in this industry is the sheer amount of effort and work that is put into the card algorithms, the breakdowns of how cards come in packs, how they come in sets, and pull ratios of things. Because I think there's a common misconception that if you get the art, check. You make a game, check. You put it into a program, get it all designed, send it to the printers, and then you just, all right, job's done. Wait for it to get printed. That's not how it works. And that golden pack ratio is what we're talking about, building the best booster boxes you can. Because ultimately that's your big ticket item, right? You yourself, you crack booster boxes on your channel all the time, right?
Sure.
But you go through and, when you're opening a box of Fab and you're hunting for those cold foils, or you're hunting for those fables, right? And then, your Majestics hit at certain pull ratios. And that's what I mean. Is there's work that is put into that. That's not just a random algorithm that's put through a system, right? Someone designed that. Someone intended those cards to be in that order. And for Ravaged Lands, for instance, I did 40 hours of hand-done, pages upon pages of hand-done algorithms, pack by pack, box by box, case by case. And I wanted to make sure that it was the most detailed and the most broken down that I possibly could do. And I remember when we submitted it to our printing company, our printing facility had been printing for 20 years, and they actually got the owner of the company said to me, I have never seen something this sophisticated. Usually we just get it, we put it into the system, the computer randomizes it, and that's how it goes. It actually got to a point where my algorithms, they had to actually program them card by card into their system to do my algorithms that I created.
Oh, jeez.
And it's not like I'm trying to reinvent the wheel, but that's how important those pull ratios and those things were to me. So when you look at the cards, the packs that you're talking about, the 10 card per pack in Ravaged Lands, you think, okay, well, it's only 10 cards per pack. Some games do 9, some games do 12, some games do 15, right? But when you really boil it down, is that there's a certain ratio of cards per pack, per backs, per box. So what I go by is, and you take a set total. So you take a set total like Frontiers, for instance, 181 cards in the set, right? So you have 181 cards in the set, and then so you take that set total and you times it by 5%. Times it by 5%, that is 9.05. You plus 1, that's 10. That equals 10 card packs, right? So that's going to give you your best pull ratio. So if you take a total set size, you times it by 5%, add 1, that gives you your best pull ratio per pack based on your set size. So what I wanted to do is I hit it right on the mark with Frontiers. With Ravaged Lands, because it was our first set, we created what we would like to call a little bit of set arbitrage. So what we did is instead of, I know that there's some games that we necessarily don't mention, but there are some games, not throwing anybody under the bus, I'm not going to label anyone, but I've consistently over the years of playing trading cards, you go to a tournament, you go to a big event, and what do you see? You see people rip open boxes, packs everywhere, but then there's just piles of cards left on the table.
Yeah.
And people take 1 or 2 cards and walk away. To
Absolutely.
me, that's not the player's fault. That's not the consumer's fault. I look at that. That's poor game design. Because to me, they didn't put the work in to make cards in that set worth it. They didn't put the work in to make the pull ratio perfect. And
Mhm.
you know, everyone is bound to make this mistake. We're all human. But to see it consistently shows lack of care to me. And the way I look at that is that you have one of two options outside of trying to hit that perfect pack ratio. You have what we call box chaff, which is just too much of one thing. Abundance of
Yeah.
commons, crazy amounts of bulk. People don't need that. Or you have not box chaff, but then you have box anemia. And the box anemia concept of is the fact is like there's not enough. Maybe your set is 400 cards, but you only give people 180 cards in a box. Well, that's going to take them forever to collect the whole set. So then it's
Yeah.
anemic. It's not enough, right? So it's finding that perfect pack ratio where you feel suffice, because you got to face it, the average player that plays multiple games or even one or two, they don't have a tremendous amount of disposable income. I know you don't, right? I know Matt and I
Right.
don't, right? So if you're a fan of a game, you want to support it. But you also don't want to buy box after box after box after box to get your set. But you also, at the same time, you don't want to buy one box and open everything,
Absolutely.
right? So you
Exactly.
got to find that sweet spot,
100%.
right? You got to find that sweet spot between chase and appropriateness.
Chase was exactly the word I was thinking of, because you want to have that feeling like you want to have value regardless, whatever you pick up, but you also want to have, there's that something that you're trying to get.
Yeah, for sure.
There's
Is.
definitely that fine line. And I think you've done a good job, like you were talking about, of hitting that.
Yeah, and it's the thing is with that fine line, it's a matter of that balance that's so crucial, right? And
Yep.
it's just trying to make sure that everything is flowing properly and according to plan when it comes to that fine line. Because, like I said, you don't want a whole bunch of stuff that's just an
Mm-hmm.
overabundance. Like, to me, it looks so poor when you open a booster box and you get the whole set in one box.
Yeah.
How does a player feel opening that? But then, more importantly, how does a store sell that?
That's definitely a big issue too. Again, not necessarily naming names, but so many games do have that issue of not being able to, a box, two boxes, you've got everything. What's a store supposed to do with that?
Exactly. Like, sure, that's great for new people getting in necessarily right off the bat. You get everything you need, you can build decks and stuff like that. But at the same time, on the store's perspective, how does a store churn product? How do they
Yeah.
they keep the lights on, right? Like,
Sure.
you have to have an adequate amount of chase where people don't feel like they're being ripped off because it's
Yeah.
too hard to get. But at the same time, we all want to collect shiny cardboard. We all want to have
Absolutely.
that little chase factor, right? And those kind of things are so important into a game's design that it often gets forgotten about. People so focus on the art, people focus on the gameplay, but it's the packaging and the
Mm-hmm.
display and distribution of your product to the consumer in a physical box is so intentional and so key. So, like I was saying, the average player doesn't have a crazy amount of disposable income. So
Mm-hmm.
what's the best thing to do? The average player buys one or two booster boxes. So the way I design the sets for Legions is that if you buy one booster box, you get a good, healthy taste of everything.
Yeah.
You buy a second booster box, you should have all of the commons that you need from that
Mm-hmm.
set. And you should have a majority, if not every single uncommon. And then the rares,
Mm-hmm.
you're missing a few, right? Because the average player will buy two boxes usually.
Sure.
Right? Because it's
Yeah.
like, oh, one's really good, I'll buy another, right? But then if you appropriately put those chase cards in, like I did with Frontiers, where one of your big hit Exalteds come one in every two boxes, and the average player buys two boxes. Now what happens is you buy the first one, You got some good sweet taste. You buy a second one. You open it. You're loving it. You hit an exalted. Boom! I hit a chase card. Now I want more.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then they buy the third. Right?
Yeah.
And that's
Absolutely.
what it means. It's a matter of like it's expertly trying to craft, and it's still a learning curve for myself. I'm still learning every day, but it's the fact is that's the psychology of the sell, right? And that is what a store likes to hear, because then it keeps product moving. But that's what players like, because they have just enough taste to keep them addicted, where it's also not overabundance where they have closets of bulk.
Yep. And that, again, that is quite literally, player, store, and you supplying the store. That's win-win-win. That's great for everyone.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. I think that stuff like that kind of falls by the wayside when people talk about designing of new TCGs, and it's so hard to explain. It's so hard to explain to the player, to the store, because people just don't get that, right? They don't understand it because they're not in it, they're not doing it, right? And a lot of people are visual learners. They need to see what's going on, right?
Absolutely.
And it's something that it took me a while to learn too, but once I got it, it's just like, wow, it just clicked. It made so much sense. Right?
Yeah.
There's like literally, like I'm talking about the seminars of the psychology of the sell, right? I'm sure, Sam, you've been in your fair share of shopping malls before, right?
Absolutely.
So when you go into a shopping mall and there's like little things subliminally that your mind picks up on that you don't even know about. For instance, when you go through a shopping mall, did you happen to notice that water fountains are usually typically close to food courts?
No.
There's a reason for that. And because
in hindsight, I see it, but I hadn't thought about it.
Because typically when you're in a shopping mall, right, men don't usually go to shopping malls very often, at least by themselves. They usually go with their significant other, their spouse, a girlfriend, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah.
They're there to, those individuals are there to shop. The guys are usually like, oh, we're going to the next store, we're going to the next store. But as time goes on, the more time you spend in the mall, the more hungry you get, right? So guys are typically the ones that frequent the food courts. But when you really throw it all the way back and you know the psychology of the sell is that the guys are attracted to shimmering, beautiful water. The concept of a vista, a getaway, especially when you're dragging yourself through a mall all day. It reminds you of a little bit of a break, a little bit of the outdoors, a little bit of the, right? So you're drawn
to that
oasis. Yeah. You're drawn to that. And then when you get there, I look over, oh, there's a food court. Oh, I'm hungry. I'm going to go buy something. Right?
Yep.
Just like when you have women's clothing stores are often located very close to jewelry stores. There's a reason for that.
That makes sense.
Right? When you go to the grocery store, you ever notice when you're pushing that cart, whether your wife's putting stuff in the or that thing, or you're doing it yourself and you're going through and you're shopping in the grocery store, you ever look down while you're dragging your feet on the cart and you look down and you notice that the squares, the tiles on the floor in the grocery store are typically very small. They do that because as you're looking down and pushing the cart, naturally you're looking where you're going. And because the tiles are so small, it looks like you're going through the aisle faster than you actually are. So your mind picks up on that, and initially you're like, whoa, I might miss something. I gotta slow down. You slow down, you look more, you buy more.
That's cool.
That's really neat, yeah.
So like these are the kind of things, right, that those translate into the trading card game world. You make a slim, sleek looking box. You'll make a box like our Bountiful Harvest. Slim, it's sleek, it's colorful.
Which is gorgeous. Yeah.
I love that.
You like, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, it caught my eye. Oh, it's less money. I'm gonna buy it. Oh, I'm gonna buy a couple. Right?
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. That's the psychology to sell. Right?
I have one behind me. I was like, oh, I need to look at that box. It's so pretty.
And that's the thing. Like Ravaged Lands was a gray stone-like box, not as visually appealing, but it's also our biggest set, so it stands out still. Right?
And what is there is still, you can have a a gray box that's just a gray box. But I feel like even Ravage Lands has just enough pop on it.
And that's why we did the actual Ravage Lands in bright yellow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the kind of stuff I don't think it gets talked about in the industry enough, is that psychology of the sell. What attracts the customer? What do they look at and what do they like? What do they look at and what do they want to buy? But then when they buy it, they also want to feel whole. They want to know they got their money's worth, right? But stores, when they first look at it and they break it down, well, if Frontiers is $85 a box, US dollars a box, and I'm only getting 18 packs, that price per pack work, that's in a lot of stores' mind, that's too expensive. But the set was actually crafted to be 18 packs intentionally for that golden pack ratio.
Right.
It was the first set we did that had the pure golden pack ratio. And you notice the Frontier box is gold. The booster packs are gold.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's literally an intention behind every single thing, even down to the detail of the packaging that I took into consideration.
That's impressive.
And like that's the level of detail, but it's so hard to get that point across when people just look at things as face value. And that's why it's really hard. Like we find the hardest part is getting the Legions out there, because everyone who opens it, tries it, plays it, enjoys it, and sticks around with it.
Absolutely.
But it's getting it in people's hands and trying it out is the hardest part, because they just see, oh, it's a new game, it's going to be a flash in the pan, or this box ratio doesn't seem right to me, this amount of packs don't seem right to me, but they're crafted that way intentionally.
Sure. Yep. And it's so cool. Like I say, a lot of this, I feel like some of that was new to me too, but I just thought that was such a cool explanation again, to your point, people just don't know that. I thought it was a simple question, but it got such a cool in-depth answer. I appreciate you sharing it the first time, but sharing it again, being willing to walk through it again. Because if I thought it was interesting, now I'm pretty nerdy, so maybe I'm wrong, but I thought other people would find all of that interesting too.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, and you talk about it in the beginning of the podcast, that I talk with a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm about what I talk about. It's because I've never loved learning something so much. Like to me, it's just this past year and a half has been a crash course in everything. Sure. Learning from marketing, from mass production, to proper codes and regulations on your product, importing and exporting out of countries, and like making sure that you meet industry standards and appropriate ratings on things. And like there's so much other stuff involved in a TCG. It's not just like, I think Rudy said it best in one of his videos back like last year. He said, it's all these Kickstarter TCGs popping up. He's like, don't back them. Because he says, ultimately, they're just some dude in the basement. And they're just trying to figure out a way to scheme or to plan. And you know what? I don't believe that's necessarily 100% true. He has that viewpoint, but I think there's a lot of people with really good intentions. I think there's a lot of people that have a genuine great concept or great idea, but where they lack is in the execution. Because I think that people go into it, and I did too. You go into it very naive. You think this is easier than it is. And this is going to be cheaper than it is, than you thought. Or this is going to be, this is not going to take as much time than you thought. But when you really start peeling back the layers, oh boy, is it a very big onion.
Absolutely.
And this is a monster of an industry, right? Like, and the crazy part is that people so focus on the market and the dollar amounts of cards being traded and sets being produced and print runs and all of it. And
I know I fall into that trap sometimes.
Yeah, and there's money exchanging hands all over the place, and it's hard to sell someone on passion. it's easy to sell someone on value.
Very true.
Right?
Yeah.
Because they're like, anyone can have passion. Passion doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't. But passion makes sure that your game survives.
Absolutely.
Right? Because those who aren't willing to learn are destined to repeat history.
Oof. It's a commonly stated lesson that people don't learn, but it's true.
And I'm trying to learn everything I can every day, absorb it.
Yeah.
I live and breathe this stuff, man. And, you know, I'm not without my flaws. Man, I was so mad when I made a pretty big game typo and exalted in Frontiers. I was pretty mad about that.
Sure, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And, you know, if it was like a little word here or there, like I missed a letter or something, sure. But like I missed an actual like act on an exalted card. Oh man, I was so mad at myself, right? But it's hard when you have such a small team and you're going over things 90,000 times before they're printed. Eventually everything just looks the same to you, right? And you come to work every day and you're trying to be as focused as possible, but when you've seen the same cards for 4 or 5 years, you're like, okay, let's just get it out to the public now, right? Let's make this a reality. And you know, some things like that unfortunately slip through the cracks, and I know I'll take it on the chin. I messed that one up. You know, but once again, it's a learning curve. It's another thing to learn with, right?
Well, and that's a huge lesson in and of itself, is just the willingness to step out and say, I messed that up. Not everybody is going to do that. So that shows an awful lot of integrity, I guess is a good word here, in just seeing that pop up and being willing to,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to learn from it. Try not to do it again. I messed that up. I'm sorry. Like, that's huge.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the major things, that, you don't really see as much, especially with the bigger corporations. I think maybe because you just don't have a face behind it. And being a small indie creator, you have to, in today's world, you have to be interacting with the community. You got to be there, right? And that's a word that I know Rudy, going back to what he said before, but that's a word that gets thrown around a lot. Community,
Mm-hmm.
right? Mm-hmm. But what does it really mean to be part of that TCG community? What does it really mean to be involved in it? And it ultimately, it comes down to not me just putting in the effort, it's everyone else putting the effort in too, right?
Yeah.
Like, I appreciate, because you make content for us and you open boxes, like you're putting the effort in as the community. You're being a contributing member to not only the game and for yourself, for your content, but also to help us as a company, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things that excited me the most, not, you know, patting myself on the back for that massive 100 subscribers. Kidding. I know I'm relatively small scale here. But the fact that I did a giveaway for that, and Legions, I think, was the most popular option I threw out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was so excited to be able to, like, I had intentionally picked up some extra of the 2-player, the battle deck sets, so that somebody could have their pick. Hey, pick one. I'll give you extra commons, uncommons of both of those, and Bounty Realm stuff. I'll give you a big old package. And people seemed excited and wanted that. So I thought that was cool to see how many people were actually like, oh, wait, yeah, Legions, that's kind of cool. I haven't tried that yet. Put me on for that. I thought that was neat.
And see, and that's the kind of awesome stuff that content creators like yourself and Andrew have done for us, is that whole pay it forward mentality, right? Is the fact that you guys are awesome. You're both very humble people. I had an opportunity to spend time with you guys. I would love to do it again. I know I've only known you guys for a short period of time, and most of it has been through, you know, online and through distance like this. But
sure,
you know, it's that's the other side of it. That's the joy of all the hard work, is you get to meet amazing individuals like you guys, and being able to interact literally with the community at a face value, whether it's at a con or a tournament or just like we're doing right now,
Yeah.
and that kind of stuff, that builds long lasting friendships, that builds a strong sense of worth and camaraderie. And it's the kind of thing that really makes TCGs in the industry so special, I think, because it's
Absolutely.
accepting. It allows people to come in from all walks of life. There's very little judgment outside of, this is my favorite game, this is my favorite game. But,
right. Yeah.
But it's so welcoming, but at the same time, yet so fickle. Right?
That's true.
And if you're not super popular, then you're yesterday's news, right? And that is the one thing that indie TCG developers like we are. That's our biggest challenge, right?
Yeah.
How do you stay relevant in people's eyes, right? And usually that comes with set after set, or big news, or everybody's always looking at, like, what have you done for me lately, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to show it in a different way. We're trying to show the fact that, like, the effort is there. We put it in. And if people just take the little bit of most of time, just a slight bit of time, just to learn a little more, peel back one or two of those layers, and really see what we have to offer and what we as a company give the community, but what our community does for us as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. No,
Absolutely.
I think the community is awesome, and I feel like the community can be like a make or break for a game, 100%.
Yes. I've seen it in different gaming groups all around. It can either be a make or break by being a healthy, supportive thing. It can just be a ambivalent thing that kind of fizzles out, or it can be an actively toxic thing that forces people out, depending on the game and the people that get pulled in. It's always exciting. Nobody that I've dealt with in the Legions world has been a negative or even a middling personality. Everybody has been excited. Everybody's been really into it, really excited, really wanting to help people out. Like it's been cool to see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think it's just, once again, it comes back to that pay it forward mentality. I think the people we have in our community have seen the effort that you've put in and the work that you do, whether it's behind the scenes or just in general making videos and supporting us.
Sure.
Any little bit that you do is that pay it forward, and it really helps us a lot. And I think our community respects you for it. And and like, we like to, as a whole, I like to think that we help those who help us, and the truest sense of community in its actual definition.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's the kind of stuff we try and relay to the stores. I know you've been putting work in trying to get us some additional stores.
I'm working on it. I'm trying.
I know, and it's hard, right? Because sometimes you're just beating your head against the wall, right? Because once again, 100%. It comes back to that, you can't sell passion.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where it becomes a really challenging thing. But ultimately, you get it in front of people. I think the game and what we've done to this point, it sells itself. It's just a matter of having people just give it a try.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
You just got to get that foot in the door.
And you've been a big proponent of that and a big help with that. And I hope maybe we might see you at Gen Con. That would be really cool.
I'm pondering that. I've always said maybe this is the year I go to Gen Con for at least the last 15 years. This one, I'm leaning more strongly into it after seeing y'all announce you'd be there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's be real here. You're probably going for Lorcana, but we're just an added benefit.
I was saying it before I even knew that they might be there. So no, I know y'all. Like that's the thing. 100%. That's something else to look into. You know me. I just like I like games in general. I happen to like yours a lot. I'll be interested in whatever they've got going on, but especially after, to your point, just spending that day chatting after I got mercilessly destroyed in that 5K in Clarksville. Just getting to, when you're not actively selling the game to other people, being able to wander by, say, hey, chat for a few minutes until you've got to do something else. Like, that's exciting to me as much as anything.
Well, we look at it as no matter what, we're just one person talking to another person and having a human interaction. And that's what TCGs give people in a world that's so digital. Is the fact that in-person interaction is so crucial to keep alive and pure in our industry. And there's really nothing beats that sit down, that social interaction of 1 versus 1 or a pod of players playing a game, because in a world that we're so distant, to have that connection and build those bonding friendships, it means so much, not only in the development of young children, but it also means so much in the development of us as adults, and having that social interaction and just having that little bit of fantasy escape from the harshness of the world, right?
Absolutely. I agree completely.
Well, I think that pretty much sums up what we have here tonight, or I guess this morning. You guys are listening to it in the morning. Sam, do you have anything to add? Anything that you'd like to ask lastly, or anything that you want to say?
I'm just excited to be on here and chatting with y'all as much as anything. I feel like I used my questions and ended up dominating a little bit more than I feel like Matt had some questions too that I ran away and stole his thunder, and I apologize for that.
Hey,
but
no, that's all good, man.
I had a good time.
I had a
no
great
worries,
time.
no worries. We got Matt on every podcast. We can run him through the gauntlet later.
Exactly.
We would love to have you back on, Samuel.
I was about to say, that's the bonus of it, is that if there are any questions that were me specific or whatever, those can be for part 2.
Yeah,
exactly,
for sure. That's the benefit to being an easy sign up for everybody. I know you've been on the list a long time. We've been trying to make the schedules work to get it lined up. Like I said, sorry, sure. I was running behind tonight. We had a tournament and I got to hustle around and everything, but we'll make it work. Like I said, you can't make money on passion, but at the same time, passion doesn't sleep. So
exactly.
True that.
Well, I think that concludes it. Anything else? The final thing that you'd like to add, Sam? I know you got a lot of fans out there.
Oh, just as always, frankly, I just appreciate everybody in both, who listens to me, who's in this Legion's Realms at War community. Y'all have been some of my biggest supporters all along, since I really I had one like aborted run at it and then started again a few months later. And since I started again, you guys have been an amazing encouragement and support to me. So all of you, everyone listening to this, I feel like has probably been a huge part of that and has really spurred me on. And I appreciate every one of you.
Well, and like you say, Sam, at the end of your videos, I really appreciate your time. And I'm glad you had you on with us. Matt, is there anything else that you'd like to say to wrap everything up?
Well, this was Legion's Lounge. This is available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Castbox, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, and Stitcher.
Well, I mean, that pretty much covers it all, right?
Basically anywhere.
All right. Well, Sam, it's been awesome. I really look forward to listening to this and having you on a Monday morning. It's going to be great.
Fantastic. I look forward to it as well.
All right. Until next time, guys. This is us in the Legion's Lounge, where we just sit around and talk about this and that.
Bye, y'all.
Always. See you until next time.